What could the Baltimore Ravens roster look like based off of what we know from minicamp? We dive into a full 53-man roster prediction post minicamp for the Baltimore Ravens next year on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we returned here with another episode of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire. Of course, we're here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. We're free and available on all platforms, including on YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by Bet Online. Bet Online is who covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. Bet Online, where the game starts. And we're back. It is another week of Baltimore Ravens talk. Mandatory minicamp officially in the rearview mirror, as that happened last week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And now the wait is on. We're waiting until training camp. And again, just checking off those boxes on the checklist, as I've said so many times here, with rookie minicamp, voluntary OTAs, mandatory minicamp. And yeah, soon enough we'll be at training camp. But here today, I do want to dive into a post-mandatory minicamp 53-man roster prediction. Now, this is a very early roster prediction. I don't expect these predictions to obviously hold up, and then my predictions will change throughout the rest of this offseason. But it is it's fun to look back at what we heard during minicamp, what we saw during minicamp, and look at just what the roster could look like based off of those things. So in the second segment, we'll look at what the offense could look like from a 53-man roster perspective. In the final segment, we'll take a look at the defense and also the specialists as well. Can't forget about the specialists. But in the first segment, I do want to dive into a bit more of what Lamar Jackson did say during his press conference with the media, but not about his contract. We were so caught up with the contract stuff, because again, that's what a lot of people wanted to know about, just where are the Ravens and Lamar Jackson with the contract and all those different questions. But Lamar Jackson also had a lot of interesting things to say not related to that, and I felt like that stuff all got swept under the rug, and we didn't really get to talk about it. So I want to talk a bit about that, not contract related Lamar Jackson sound bites from Thursday in the first segment. So again, we'll be talking about the Ravens roster, my post minicamp roster predictions in the second and third segments. In the first segment, about Lamar Jackson, what he had to say, not relating to his contract. But before we dive into the content, if you're here with us on YouTube, so you can see my face and my background and everything involved, be sure to drop a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. We're really close to 2,000 subscribers. This has been a goal of mine ever since we hit 1,000, kind of climbing up the ladder here. We're so close. I greatly appreciate everyone who's already subscribed. It really does mean a lot. And if you're thinking about why you should subscribe to this channel, we put out daily Ravens content 5 days a week. So if you want Ravens news, analysis, updates, opinions, we have that all here for you 5 days per week. So be sure to hit subscribe, like this video. Also, if you're here with us in audio form, thank you so much for tuning in and listening, whether it's on your way to work or from work or wherever you're listening. Thank you. We're here in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your favorite podcast. Be sure to follow us and be sure to turn notifications on. And be sure to follow me on Twitter at KOstriker34 and the Locked On Ravens account at Locked On Ravens. So let's dive into a bit of what Lamar Jackson had to say to the media, not contractually related. And he was asked a lot of questions about his contract, but he did say that he had a lot out of these last 3 days, and he got a lot out of the last 3 days as well. He said, man, we're moving. Guys came. The new guys who were in it came to work. Those guys look pretty crisp. Everyone is moving a lot smarter, and everyone is in shape. And I know a lot was made about Lamar Jackson's absence from voluntary OTAs, and I know we've had the conversation, but they were voluntary. He was there for mandatory minicamp, and that was very important. I think getting those reps and getting those snaps and was a very good thing for him to be able to do, especially with the new guys. I mean, he's establishing chemistry with a new center in Tyler Linderbaum. We talked a bit about that as well. Had actually a funny story from when he was watching a play from Tyler Linderbaum, where actually Dalen Hayes took a pick six. Dalen Hayes took a Lamar Jackson interception back to the house, and he was talking to Devin Duvernay during the play, and Tyler Linderbaum was running him down. And he just saw that he was fast, and Lamar Jackson said, quote, "He's fast as heck for a center. I've never seen a center run like that. He's a football player." So yeah, so some early endorsement there from Lamar Jackson, speedy Tyler Linderbaum, I guess there is. So yeah, as those guys get more familiar with each other, I expect their chemistry to get even better. I know Linderbaum is someone who a lot of people have high expectations for, obviously coming out of Iowa, one of the best center prospects that a lot of people have seen in years, and one of the best collegiate centers to come out of college in years. So that's very high praise, a very big bill to live up to, but I think Linderbaum can certainly do that in this Ravens offense. And he also talked a bit about the connection that he's building with Rashad Bateman, and that he and Rashad Bateman had chemistry off the bat, and, really was like they never stopped playing with each other. And I know Bateman had the injury as well. So it's not like Lamar Jackson and Rashad Bateman got a ton of time together, because Rashad Bateman obviously missed all the preseason in the first 5 weeks of the regular season. He came back in week 6 against Los Angeles, but then Lamar Jackson gets injured in week 14 and misses the remainder of that season. He misses also week 11 against Chicago. So, both guys are really in and out, kind of didn't have a lot of time to play with each other, but I'm glad that the chemistry is there for them. But some of the most interesting, I guess, sound bites we got here from Lamar Jackson, in my opinion, had to do with Marquise Brown, and whether he knew that Marquise Brown was going to be traded, and his reaction to the news. He said that actually John Harbaugh called him, and it was after a workout, and he said, okay, and he's listening to him. And, he said that he actually didn't buy into it, because he said John Harbaugh told him we're thinking about trading him, and Lamar Jackson actually didn't buy into it, and it was just a conversation. And when it actually happened, he was like, oh, like he said, what the, but it's all good. It's part of the business, he did say. And he actually made it clear that tweet that he posted after the Linderbaum pick, right around the time Marquise Brown got traded, was about the Brown trade. It wasn't about the Linderbaum pick. He said, yes, I was kind of hurt because that's my boy, but it's all good. Like I said, it is part of the business. And he also said he was kind of shocked that he was in Arizona. He did say, yes, I was shocked. I'm like, dang, but like I said, it's part of the business. So like Lamar Jackson said, if you didn't know, it's part of the business. But that's what I think I kind of took away all along. I didn't think that tweet was about Linderbaum. I know a lot of people took it that way, and you can say, oh, well, it happened right after the pick, but it was shockingly fast how quickly Marquise Brown popped up there in Arizona. Obviously, the team owner got him, and he was at the whole draft party thing. But, he's up on that stage, and the Ravens are making their pick, and the trade is, like, just announced. And all of a sudden, it's like, oh, here's your new Arizona Cardinal wide receiver, Marquise. Like, it's incredible how fast that went. And, again, I've talked about this with multiple people on this show. I was shocked about how quiet teams let it be. I mean, the Cardinals, the Ravens, there was no leakage of any kind. And honestly, they talked about it. If that trade had gotten leaked, there probably wouldn't have been a deal. And that makes sense. I think that the way that this deal was kind of orchestrated, kept under wraps until right then, I think the Ravens got good value for Marquise Brown. At the end of the day, Marquise Brown didn't want to be in Baltimore, so you're able to get a first-round pick back. Funny enough, the first-round pick that they picked him at, Marquise Brown was the 25th overall pick in 2019. The Ravens took Linderbaum at 25th overall. But again, I know we've had this conversation before, but it seemed like in Lamar Jackson, I wouldn't say he was shocked, because again, John Harbaugh did call him and did tell him the plans. It wasn't like the Ravens just did this blindly and said, oh, well, okay, hopefully Lamar finds out somehow. No, they were informative with their quarterback. They made sure he understood the situation they were thinking about it, Lamar Jackson said. But yeah, it was shocking to me. It was shocking to a lot of people. I mean, we had Kyle Barber on the show last week, and he said the media room was like, what? Like, they traded Marquise Brown? Like, what are you talking about? So, yeah, it was interesting to kind of hear Lamar Jackson's perspective on that. But he's right. It is part of the business. Marquise Brown, again, did not want to be in Baltimore. The offense, he said, was not for him. So now he goes in Arizona to reunite with Kyler Murray, and, maybe that offense is more for him. And the Ravens offense is not for everybody. I definitely understand that. But at the end of the day, the Ravens now have their other group of wide receivers with Bateman and Devin Duvernay and James Prochet and Tyler Wallace. So Lamar Jackson providing some perspective on that. And he also kind of talked about the back and forth he had on Twitter with Chris Sims of NBC Sports. And he said that sometimes it's clickbait, and that he actually got baited by Chris Sims, because Lamar was like, dang, I want to be myself. I don't want to be the next guy. I look at myself as Lamar Jackson, not Tom Brady, this and that. I want the Super Bowls like Tom Brady, but I'm still myself. So that's why I responded. No hard feelings, though. He's doing his job. So, yeah, I mean, Lamar Jackson is Lamar Jackson. He's right. He's not Tom Brady. He is a unique talent, someone who is just Lamar Jackson. There's no other way to really put that. So I think when talking about just all these people saying, oh, well, he has to be like this guy, he has to be like that guy. I mean, even like the Michael Vick comparisons, right? He's been compared to Michael Vick time and time and time and time again. But Lamar Jackson is Lamar Jackson. It's what makes him special. It's what makes him unique. It's what makes him so hard to figure out, as we've heard many different times before. Oh, is he figured out? Is he figured out? No, because he is still such a unique talent. So the fact that he kind of went in depth on that too is very interesting. Again, a lot of the talk was surrounding his contract, and I think that is what got picked up the most. But there were very interesting sound bites not related to the contract that I just wanted to talk about because, again, I think they were worth talking about, definitely. We'll head into our first break here on Locked On Ravens. Still a ton to talk about. We're going to dive into our post-minicamp 53-man roster prediction, starting off with the offensive side of the ball. So be sure to stay tuned. Still a ton to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. First, I do want to tell you a bit about Blue Nile. And whether you're ready to pop the question or you're celebrating a milestone moment, the fine jewelry as unique as her with the modern convenience of online shopping at BlueNile.com. Blue Nile has simple online tools that let you choose the diamond shape, size, and clarity, as well as setting style. Blue Nile's bench jewelers will then handcraft a perfect engagement ring. Each ring is one of a kind. And if you're looking for fine jewelry but are having trouble choosing, Blue Nile has jewelry experts on hand 24/7. They're available via phone or chat to help you find a memorable gift at every budget. Make your moment sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com. And Locked On Sports listeners get $50 off purchases of $500 or more. This podcast exclusive includes engagement. Use code Locked On. That's code Locked On. Plus, every order is insured, ships free, and arrives in discreet packaging. Then we'll give away what's inside. So shop stress free and find your forever peace. Go to BlueNile.com today. We're back here. Our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still here with you again. Thank you so much for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. Be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, like this video in video form. Be sure to follow us in audio form and turn notifications on as well. But let's now dive into these roster predictions here. Again, post-minicamp. And there are a couple rules here that I kind of set for myself. Kind of interesting ones, so I'm going to explain them. Not a ton. Again, just pretty much roster predictions. But so what I have here is I'm assuming everyone is healthy outside of Tyus Bowser and David Ojabo. I'm assuming, and again, no like inside and none of that. I'm just assuming that everyone is healthy. So in this scenario, everyone is healthy for week 1 outside of Tyus Bowser and David Ojabo. So that's what we're working with. So you'll see J.K. Dobbins on this prediction, not on the PUP list. Same thing with Gus Edwards, Ronnie Stanley, Marcus Peters, but Bowser and Ojabo are going to be left off of it just because I think their timelines are a little bit further pushed back. Again, we don't know, but that's the rule of this one. So again, as we get further in the offseason, maybe we will get more updates and we'll figure out more. So those predictions will have a little bit more accuracy in terms of just the timelines. But right now, at the time of this recording, we just don't really know those timelines. So with the rules, that's the only rule. So with those rules out of the way, let's dive into the offensive roster predictions here. And again, I have my handy dandy cheat sheet, and I did the math here. And there were some tough decisions I had to make, and more so on the defensive side of the ball. So we'll talk about those in the final segment. But starting off with the offense, quarterback wise, I think I am going to go with what a lot of people have and say 2 quarterbacks. And you can probably guess who those quarterbacks are: Lamar Jackson and Tyler Huntley. I think that the Ravens could probably, outside of like a stellar, like best quarterback, top 10 quarterback performance preseason by Brett Hundley or Anthony Brown, they could probably get one, if not both of those guys on the practice squad. I just think with what the Ravens will need from a depth perspective at other positions, I think that they can keep 2 quarterbacks in either, whether it is Huntley or whether it is Brown or another guy that they find to get on the practice squad. They can survive with 2 quarterbacks on the active roster. And then if they need to call up a third quarterback or if they need to get another guy, they can do that at this point. So for Brett Hundley or Anthony Brown, those guys are more practice squad, in my opinion, at this point. So for quarterbacks, 2 guys with Lamar Jackson and Tyler Huntley. Running backs is more of a controversial position, I would say. Some people believe they should keep 3. Others believe they should keep 4. Even some people say 5. They say, let's just all in on the running backs. I'm saying 4, though. And my 4 are J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, Mike Davis, and Tyler Beatty. Those are my 4. This means that Justice Hill is off. This means that Nate McCreary is off. Ricky Person is off. There are a lot of talented guys the Ravens have, but Justice Hill at this point, again, this is where we are right now. I'm not predicting it based off what we see in the 2022 preseason. We're not there yet. Based off of what I saw from Justice Hill last preseason and last training camp, there wasn't enough there for him to earn a roster spot then. I think that he probably would have been released if he didn't get injured and was able to go on IR and everything. So this is a big training camp for Justice Hill, but right now I think the Ravens will go with the veteran experience and Mike Davis, and then Tyler Beatty, a 6th-round pick who, again, I had a 4th-round grade on. I posted a video of him on Twitter actually last night. of just a route that he ran where he left this guy in the dust. I mean, he's a good route runner, good receiver, good ball carrier as well, breaks tackles. I mean, I'm very high on Tyler Beatty. I think he's going to be great in this system. And I don't think the Ravens are going to cut a draft pick here that they took. It's possible, the Eric DeCosta era has been a lot less safe for draft picks in terms of like they will cut you if you don't perform. I know the Ozzie Newsome era was more of, all right, we're going to give the draft picks a couple years regardless outside of very, very unique circumstances. But yeah, I think for me, the 4 running backs, J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, Mike Davis, Tyler Beatty, those are my picks. Fullback, that's one guy, and that is Patrick Ricard, not Ben Mason. The Ravens, they have big plans for Patrick Ricard in this offense. I think Ben Mason, the best spot for him is on Baltimore's practice squad. You can learn behind Patrick Ricard, fill a role. And I think that, that was what the Ravens wanted last year, but he ended up going to New England and then was in Houston for a bit, I believe. And it didn't work out that way. But to have insurance for Ricard in this very unique offense that is successful and caters to a player like Mason's skill set, I think that is the best option for him. But for now, yes, one fullback in Patrick Ricard. Wide receiver, this was a tough one. I ended up going with 5. And again, I'm not putting a veteran on here because there's no veteran on the roster right now. So what I'm going with is obviously the big 4, some people call them: Rashad Bateman, Devin Duvernay, James Prochet, Tylan Wallace. Then it was tough. I was between 4 guys here: Benjamin Victor, Mekhi Polk, Shamar Bridges, and Devin Williams. I ended up going with Mekhi Polk, though. For right now, I feel like he is somebody who, very proven in college, someone who fits the profile of what the Ravens need. And again, a lot of these guys do, the big body contested catch type receivers. But Polk is someone who I think is very intriguing to me and I think could have a very big preseason. But I was very close to picking Bridges and very close to picking Victor. It was a very, very close one. I think I like Slade Bolden a lot. I think he's just a bit too redundant in terms of what they have right now. Again, a big preseason, big training camp could sway me in a different direction, but I just think the Ravens at this point should use their 5th wide receiver spot on that big bodied type. And while Slade Bolden, I mean, I like him a lot. He's super talented, but I think maybe he could be, again, like a practice squad guy. It could be insurance for a player like James Prochet, let's say, for et cetera. But now moving on to tight ends, it was 4 here for me. So I'm going 4-5-4 with running backs, wide receivers, tight ends. Those 4, decently obvious. You might guess them: Mark Andrews, Nick Boyle, Charlie Kolar, Isaiah Likely. Those are the 4. I just don't see a spot for Josh Oliver. I think he could be a trade candidate. I talked about this with Kaji Ismail a couple weeks ago with some early trade candidates on the Baltimore roster. I just think that for what the Ravens have right now, they're not going to cut either of their 2 draft picks. I think both are way too talented. I mean, Isaiah Likely shown flashes in training camp. Charlie Kolar is likened to Mark Andrews. They're not going to do that unless something crazy happens. Nick Boyle restructured his contract. He's looking good. So again, I don't think that's on the table. And then Mark Andrews, come on. No. Ravens aren't cutting Mark Andrews. So for me, I think Josh Oliver is an odd man out here, unfortunately. And it was not, if this is what happens, it was not the best stint in Baltimore for Josh Oliver. I just, traded a conditional 7th for him, and that 7th ends up going to Jacksonville because Oliver made the roster. And yeah, not a huge impact player. Made some plays, but I think not as many as the Ravens would have liked. So yeah, 4 tight ends for the Ravens. Offensive line, though, I have 9 offensive linemen. I'll read them out: Ronnie Stanley, Ben Cleveland, Tyree Phillips, Patrick McCary, Tyler Linderbaum, Kevin Zeitler, Morgan Moses, Juwan James, Daniel Falele. Now, this one was one of the tough decisions for me in a couple aspects. One, I think that Ben Powers in this situation gets traded, much like Ben Bredesen did when the Ravens knew they didn't have enough roster space to keep all their offensive linemen, where they traded Ben Bredesen as well as Greg Mance. But I think this could be the same situation where the Ravens actually have to trade away 2 offensive linemen just because they don't have enough roster space, but they're almost like too talented to let go for nothing if you can find a trade partner who will give you some assets. So Ben Powers is one of those people. Another one that was literally like one of the last cuts for me. I think it was the second to last cut. Tristan Colon. Tristan Colon's a player that I like a lot. But with Tyler Linderbaum now in the fold, you could say Patrick McCary is the backup center, even though I think that his best role is the super 6 sub guy. If the Ravens have to cut from somewhere, I think it could be the center position and maybe try to sneak him on the practice squad. They potentially could try to. I think he would get scooped up. I think that would, because there were teams that wanted to take him off the Ravens practice squad during his rookie season. The Ravens had to add him to their active roster so that wouldn't happen. So I think that Cologne's another player that could potentially be just a part of the numbers game, which is unfortunate because the Ravens have so much depth. It's going to come down to these decisions, which like you want these decisions to be on the table. You don't want them to have no depth. So it's like, all right, like we can keep all the guys we want, but then like there are 10 others who we're kind of iffy on, but we have to keep them because there's no depth. The Ravens have done a good job, again, at most positions of getting a lot of depth, building up a lot of depth. And offensive line is one of them. I mean, in this situation, the Ravens are keeping a bunch of tackles, Ronnie Stanley and Morgan Moses, Jawan James, and Falele, but that's what they need to do. They need to keep those guys because they're not going to let themselves get burned again by Ronnie Stanley, which is what they, I'm glad they did that, and I'm glad they have that depth. But you have to, if you're adding at other positions, you have to take away from another. And in this situation, if you're keeping 4 tackles here instead of maybe 3 and like a swing guy or something, because you could argue Tyree Phillips is a swing guy. I personally think is a guard, but you could argue it. I think that the Ravens would have to take away another position. And for me, I think that is the center position, unfortunately. So Cologne and Powers, 2 of the odd men out here, again, just purely based off of the numbers game. So yeah, a lot of guys, a lot of talent on this team. And on the offensive side of the ball, I think this is a pretty well-balanced out offense, again, with the 4-5-4 with running backs, wide receivers, tight ends. Solid offensive line group. I feel confident about that depth as well. And yeah, so a lot of talent on the offensive side of the ball. But we'll head into our final break here on Locked On Ravens. Still a ton to talk about. We'll dive into the defensive side of the ball and flip the field in our final segment. So be sure to stay tuned. Still a ton to talk about on Locked On Ravens. First, I do want to tell you a bit about Bet Online. And BetOnline.net is the number one source for all your sports betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's NHL playoffs and Major League Baseball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and more. And BetOnline.net remains your best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today. Use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. We're back here. Our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Ostreicher, your host, still here with you again. Thank you so much for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. Be sure to subscribe again here on YouTube. Our next goal, 2,000 subscribers. Be sure to like the video as well. And be sure to follow us anywhere you get your audio podcast. And also be sure to make your second listen Locked On NFL. I hosted the Monday show over there once again. So if you want to hear me talk, we talked about the safety position, the AFC North too, Minka Fitzpatrick. We talked about Jesse Bates and the Chiefs as well. So if you want to tune into that, be sure to check out Locked On NFL anywhere you get your podcast, including on YouTube. But let's move into the defensive side of the ball. These were tough decisions. The defensive side of the ball has a lot of positions where you could argue, oh, well, they should keep 5 here and 6 there and 8 here. There are 53 spots on the roster, and you just can't keep everybody. So there were a couple really tough decisions here that came down between 2 very talented players. And again, these could shift. These could change as the offseason continues to go on. But again, I do think it's fun to just dive into post-minicamp. What did we learn from minicamp? All right, cool. Like this guy could do this guy could do that. So diving into the defensive line, the Derek Wolfe news made this a bit easier. In fact, a lot easier. I kept all 6 guys that I think a lot of people are expecting the Ravens to keep here. That's obviously Calais Campbell, Michael Pierce, just amount of BK, Broderick Washington, Brent Urban, and Travis Jones. Very excited about this group. It's one of the groups I'm most excited about. I think it's one of the groups that actually has the most depth. One of the groups that has the most depth. There are a couple that could take the cake potentially. I'm still kind of sorting through which one I feel the most confident in, but the defensive line is certainly up there. And it's that balance. Again, I've talked about this before, but it's the balance of having very good veteran talent and very good young talent. So it's not like you have all veterans in their 30s. It's not like you have all rookies or second year or third year guys. I'd like the balance they have. I think if the Ravens can manage Calais Campbell snaps a bit better, and again, not blaming them, Calais Campbell had to play a ton because they had so many injuries. But if the Ravens can be able to take Calais Campbell off in some situations where he's not necessarily like quote unquote needed, I guess is the word I'll use, I think that'll be big for him, keeping him fresh the entire year. I have big expectations for Travis Jones, just amount of BK. I really like what Broderick Washington is showing me. And then obviously the veterans, Michael Pearson and Brent Urban. So that's a group I'm really confident in. Moving on to the outside linebackers. Now, this is where it gets a bit funky. From here on out, it's a little funky with what I did here. I kept 4 outside linebackers. Again, this is not going to include Tyus Bowser. It's not going to include David Ajabo. I'm assuming those 2 either start on whether it's, I don't know, IR, PUP, whatever it may be. So 4 outside linebackers for me, Adafe Owe, Dalen Hayes, Jalen Ferguson, and Jeremiah Moon, undrafted Jeremiah Moon. So this means that Stephen Means, who the Ravens signed, does not make it. He was one of the final guys I had to let go off this roster. Vince Beagle, I had to let go off this roster as well. I have big expectations for Odafe Owe and Dalen Hayes as well. Dalen Hayes was one of the minicamp darlings. And at this point, we don't know when Tyus Bowser could come back, when David Ojabo could come back. But those injuries were suffered later on in the process, right? Like J.K. Dobbins was August. Gus Edwards was early September. Marcus Peters, early September. You had Tyus Bowser in January, David Ojabo in March. Obviously, very different injuries. It varies for everybody. But with 4 outside linebackers, I'm also assuming that Malik Harrison will play a bit more at Sam, which is big. The Ravens also, again, they're not like this 100% base defense team. They will move guys around and they will play all these different positions and they will put all these DBs on the field. So I think that with that, the need for like pure outside linebackers at this point isn't as big of a need. But again, you need to have a pass rush. Like this is where not having a Justin Houston, like if Justin Houston was in the fold, I'd keep 5 guys and find somewhere else to cut from. And maybe it would be Jalen Ferguson. I don't know. But at this point, I do think a veteran at the outside linebacker position, whether it is Jason Pierre-Paul, Justin Houston, will be huge. But again, like I'm just saying that Odafe Owe is definitely that number 1 at this point. Dalen Hayes looks like number 2. And then, you can make the argument to keep 5 and say, hey, well, Stephen Means could play inside and outside, so you should keep him. Vince Beagle can play inside and outside linebacker, so you should keep him. But at this point, I just think with all the roster crunches that have to go on right now, and again, like it's cool to kind of dive into these different situations and scenarios and see, well, if they keep 5 here, can they only keep 3 here? 4 here, is only 4 there? So for me, I'm only keeping 4 outside linebackers at this point with the assumption that some other guys will play at that spot and provide that positional versatility. And the reason for me keeping Jeremiah Moon over some of the veterans is because he has impressed based off of what we've heard and what we've seen. So I think that for the Ravens, their undrafted free agent track record, very, very good. Jeremiah Moon, very big guy, 6'5", very imposing, a very good athlete. And so him coming out of Florida, I think he's one of my favorite undrafted free agents of this class, which I have a lot of favorites in this Ravens class. Speaking of undrafted favorites, Jacoby McClain makes this roster, in my opinion, here coming out of minicamp. And the inside linebacker position, I keep 4 guys as well, and that is Patrick Queen, Malik Harrison, Josh Bynes, and Jacoby McClain. Now, that spot was between Kristen Welch and Jacoby McClain, but I think, again, Jacoby McClain is a player who I think could really impress in training camp with the preseason. A lot of these inside linebackers, like the undrafted guys, could definitely do that, but I think Jacoby McClain, in my opinion, has the edge right now. And again, it's something where maybe a guy like Kristen Welch just holds that spot. With Chris Board gone, there is an opportunity, and I think Jacoby McClain takes advantage of it. So 4 outside linebackers, 4 inside linebackers. I know, I understand it is very thin there, but my reasoning for keeping 4 inside linebackers instead of 5 or even 6 is because, again, you can move Chuck Clark into the dime linebacker spot. The Ravens don't have to keep 2 inside linebackers on the field at all times. They can do 3 safeties, 6 DBs, whatever they want to do. It's not a pure base defense. So they can put unconventional packages on the field that don't necessarily have to involve all these inside linebackers on the field. And you can use some of those spots with other DBs, which is why, and kind of transitioning over, I went so DB heavy and actually kept 11 defensive backs, 7 corners, and 4 safeties. Now, this is relative to how you classify Brandon Stephens and Ar'Darius Washington. I classified both as corners. So if Ar'Darius Washington is more of a safety to you or Brandon Stephens is more of a safety, I get it. But I classified both as corners. So my 7 cornerbacks here, Marlon Humphrey, Marcus Peters, Kyle Fuller, Brandon Stephens, Armour-Davis, Pepe Williams, and Ar'Darius Washington. And my 4 safeties, Kyle Hamilton, Marcus Williams, Chuck Clark, and Tony Jefferson. This was the toughest decision I had to make. And it really came down between Geno Stone and Ar'Darius Washington. And I think that between both super good players, both really high upside, Ar'Darius Washington coming off of a foot injury. For now, I'm putting Ar'Darius Washington on. With a flip of a switch, with a play, it could be Geno Stone. Like, that is how close I think those two are. I am very high on Ar'Darius Washington. I really, really like Geno Stone. I think both players have the potential to do something great. Maybe the Ravens favor Geno Stone over his experience, or because of his experience, but it could have been a coin flip for it literally was that close. I just think Ar'Darius Washington has a bit more positional versatility with the ability to play in the slot while also being able to play safety, Whereas Geno Stone, he is versatile, don't get me wrong, but I think the Ravens view Darius Washington more as a slot corner, and maybe if the whole thing is, all right, we're going with versatility here with corners / safeties, and you have Kyle Fuller who can play inside and outside at corner. You have Pepe Williams playing in the slot. You got our Darius Washington and Brandon Stevens as well. Maybe that is too much versatility. And again, I don't think you can ever have too much of it, but maybe you think, oh, well, maybe we need that more traditional, center of the field, free safety that Geno Stone can play. Maybe that's it, right? But for right now, I kept our Darius Washington, but it really could have gone either way. I want to make it clear how close it was between those two guys and how agonizing it was to have to choose between one of them, because I really wanted to keep both. But again, it's these roster crunches, how much good depth they have on these positions. You just have to get rid of talent somewhere, because you just can't afford to keep it all based off of roster constraints. And then finally, the specialists, no surprises here. Justin Tucker, Jordan Stout, Nick Moore, the trio, not the Wolf Pack. We have to come up with a nickname for him. It's not the Wolf Pack. That is immortalized in Ravens history. But yeah, those are the three specialists. So 53 players, some very talented guys left off of this roster. Again, this will change, right? These are just initial post-minicamp predictions. We're in mid to late June right now. When the final roster actually comes out in late August, things will have changed. We'll have seen training camp, a whole preseason, right? Maybe there are injuries, hopefully not, but maybe there are some injuries the Ravens have to account for. Maybe other guys come in, maybe we'll be talking about Justin Houston or Julio Jones or someone like that. So still so much to figure out all across the board. But for now, those are my 53-man post-minicamp roster predictions for the Baltimore Ravens. That was fun. It was fun to do too, doing all those different ideas, figuring out who goes here, who goes there, where do you cut from here if you're adding more here. So again, if you agree, disagree, I totally get if you agree. Also understand if you want to keep a player here over what I did or a couple in a different position. But this was really fun to do, and I hope everybody did enjoy it. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in. When we get back in tomorrow, we'll be diving into more Ravens talk, so be sure to stay tuned for that, and I will see you here tomorrow.